Hello, everyone. You are very welcome to this masterclass session. I hope you can hear me.
Hello, yes, we can. Very well. Good morning, everybody.
Yes. Hello.
Yes. Thank you.
Hello.
Super.
Hello, everyone.
Lovely. Thank you so much. I will share my screen, and I hope you can also see the screen now. So you are very welcome to this masterclass by the education team, Ugreen. My name is Gabriela Gliga. I am a lecturer of marketing in the School of Business at ATU. And I mainly teach marketing, and then my research interests lie at the intersection of marketing, entrepreneurship, and sustainability. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. John Scahill. He is a lecturer in the School of Engineering. He is also the co-lead of the ATU Education for Sustainable Development Academy, and he is an academic developer for the Teaching and Learning Center here at ATU. So again, hello to everyone from ATU. And I will start the presentation with an overview, and then John will come in after the first 20 minutes or so. And the first thing we wanted to say was that our goal, or even the title of our masterclass today, is quite ambitious because it talks about empowerment. So the first thing we want to do is frame this concept of empowerment in higher education. And then secondly, the main purpose of the masterclass is to introduce you to some case studies from our practice, mine and John's, and you will see there is a progression in the case studies that we will show you from an individual module base level. Then we're going to move on to an institutional level, and then we'll finish with the higher level of networks and alliances. So what better way to start talking about education for sustainable development and empowerment than with the definition of ESD. So this has been taken from the UNESCO website. It is the current definition. And as you can see, I have highlighted there the first word, which is empowers. So education for sustainable development empowers people with the knowledge, skills, values, attitudes, and behaviors to live in a way that is good for the environment, economy, and society. So the very essence of education for sustainable development seems to be around empowerment, and hence our masterclass today. However, as you can see in this definition, we seem to be talking about a progression. We don't go into empowerment straight away. We might start with knowledge and skills, but obviously, in order to get to empowerment, we need to move on to those values, attitudes, and behaviors. So when we think about the role of higher education, what is our job? How can we help this transformation in our learners, and indeed for ourselves as practitioners? How do we move from creating awareness and sharing knowledge to getting to those behaviors, to those very strong attitudes towards sustainability? And probably it's important to say that the challenge in higher education is around creating this transformative educational design. So the way we think about education and its role in sustainability is this not only awareness and knowledge sharing, but moving the learners and practitioners along this continuum towards empowerment. We thought we should frame this presentation of our case studies around some key concepts that we believe are essential in understanding what empowerment means for us. So on discussing with John, we decided that there are three key concepts or theoretical aspects that really fit and can frame this idea of empowerment. The two that you see on the screen now are on transformative learning and action competence. So the first one on transformative learning is about this idea of helping learners question everything, their assumption, the status quo, and really rethinking about what we think we know or what we think things should be like. And the second concept that you see on the screen is action competence from Jensen and Schnack. And within the sustainability area, this is the unique combination of capacity, willingness, and opportunity to act. So you can see that when we talk about moving from just creating awareness or just literacy when it comes to sustainability, if we focus on these two key concepts here, education for sustainability really must cultivate both transformation and action competence. And the third theoretical framing is around the whole institution approach to education for sustainable development. And this is really important because individual enthusiasm or individual action can only take us to a certain degree. And I really like this idea of transformative sparks, and we have them. We are all here. All of us are these transformative sparks, and we care about sustainability. We want to teach it. We want to work around it, and we want to improve whatever we can through this lens of sustainability. But we really need the structural oxygen. And the structural oxygen is in our institutions, in our environment, isn't it? So we need the leadership and we need the structure and the policies, all of these that must reinforce our shared values. So the idea here is, yes, what I said on the prior slide about transformative learning and the action competence at individual level, that's really, really important. But transformative learning only begins with the individuals. It endures through systems. So we need to look at the higher level before only focusing on what we do on an individual module or program level basis. So we need to expand onto institutional levels and, of course, this higher systems level approach. And we believe that if we look at these different levels, we may provide an empowerment pathway. And I hope you like my beautiful AI image creation of a pathway, but it really feeds again into these three levels. We start with transformative learning and action competence, and probably many of us here in this masterclass, we are trying to do a lot of this in our classes, in our modules at program level. Then we need to move at an institution-wide approach. And finally, we need to see what's potentially available in terms of augmented impact with networks and alliances. So the first cases that you will see today featured in this masterclass are really about that first level of transformative learning and action competence. And then John will talk to you about cases as a whole institution design. So the two cases that I will talk to you about are the Reloop Circularity Workshop and the Sustainathon. And you can see from the names I've given these events that they are very much focused on sustainability. The Reloop Circularity Workshop is a gamified experience where students work in teams to improve a product or a service. And they use cards to do this, and the session focuses, it starts with a presentation of circularity and circularity principles. So it starts with abstract knowledge, and then it moves very quickly on to doing. So the methods involved in this workshop are experiential learning, collaboration, and then really importantly, learning by doing and the critical reflection. So I thought I would share some images so you can see what it actually is. These are the 7 circularity principles that I am focusing on in the workshop. And each of these principles has around 6 cards with prompts for the students and examples to help them think about what they could do. So again, we go through the principles, we explain circularity, we explain systems thinking, and then students working groups, they're assigned an everyday product, and they have to apply some of these principles to turn it into a circular version, and obviously a more sustainable version. And I made the cards so that they're nice and colorful. And just to give you an example, if you maybe look at the card in the front bottom left of the screen that says Design for Everyone, the prompt here would be, can you co-create with your users to ensure inclusivity and relevance? And then the examples that the students can refer to are an accessories brand that co-designs with neurodivergent teens to create sensory-friendly collection, or a neighborhood library app that is built in partnership with the elderly residents. So you can see the prompts make them think about what they can do to their everyday products, and then the examples help them, should they be stuck, with how they can make this non-circular product into a more circular version. And this learn by doing approach, of course, it's exciting and the students love it. And I have included some images of students working on this experiential activity. But what's nicer, even nicer than the photos, is the feedback after the experience. And I have selected here only a few quotes, but I really wanted to demonstrate how this sort of approaches to teaching sustainability can really lead to those two key things that we started with: transformative learning and action competence. So you can read the examples there, but maybe we might just look at one of them. I am looking at sustainability now from a completely different angle. Small changes in our individual circularity can make huge impact overall, and so on. But you can see the evidence of transformative learning, a completely different angle. And that's what we want. We want not only to tell the students, not only to spread that awareness, but get them to question. So a different angle. And then similarly for action competence, we can see quotes such as, change starts with the little things, little changes in our own behavior. So you can see again here evidence of agency, evidence of changing behavior. And of course, this is not everything, and it doesn't mean that, leaving the workshop, the students will behave in a completely different way, but it's about planting those seeds that go towards that empowerment. So it's not only, let me tell you what it is, and we stop, it's helping them build this attitude and moving towards behavior. And the second example I wanted to showcase today is the Sustainathon. And the Sustainathon is an activity that I do with a group of marketing students. I have run this twice, and hopefully I will run it again next year. I was very lucky and fortunate to get tutor funding for this project. But I basically take a whole class of our marketing students off campus for a full day. So, of course, I wouldn't be able to do that without the support and the funding. And our Center for Teaching and Learning at ATU is really fabulous in that regard. But of course, you can do a smaller scale version of this in a 2-hour session, let's say. And what we do in the Sustainathon, or what I did, is to ask students to identify a sustainable issue that they feel particularly strong about, or they're interested, or they're curious about, and then they have to create a campaign in which they would communicate and inform others about this issue. And equally, they have to prototype a stand as if they were at a trade fair or an exhibition and showcase this sustainability issue. And the key method here that really makes a difference is, of course, yes, collaboration, is creative brainstorming, is the creativity. But what makes the difference is that I ask the students to teach others, and something magical happens when they do that, because it's a huge difference from when I teach it and when I tell them about it, whether when they teach it to others, because they take ownership and all of a sudden they relate to it in such a different way, and it's becoming much more relevant to them and in their life. And again, I have included lovely images here from the Sustainathon. But the one that I'm mostly proud of is, again, the feedback. And again, evidence of both transformative learning and action competence. So you can see on transformative learning, this idea of sustainability is very important right now and not in the future. And this is particularly important because we have evidence to suggest that young people tend to associate many times, or students in general tend to associate sustainable behavior with their future selves. I'll do it when I get a job. I'll do it when I'm older. I'll do it when I finish my studies. Or this would be more important for me then. But as you can see here, yeah, is that change, questioning of assumption, it's important now. Or another one, I didn't realize how big my carbon footprint was. And this was directly following a group that has created a stand and a presentation on individual carbon footprint. So you can see how that transformation is taking place. And equally, action competence, we have quotes that say there are many ways to be more sustainable in the daily life. I can make these changes at an individual level, and so on. So again, these two case studies that I showed you are an effort to take what we do when we teach sustainability from sustainability literacy to only creating awareness and telling students about what it is and why it is important, to actually getting them on that journey, on that pathway towards empowerment. So it's about building those values, building those attitudes, and encouraging behaviors. And now John will talk to you about case studies that take empowerment on the next level, and that is in the institution-wide approach.
Thank you, Gabriella. Okay, folks, just bear with me a moment while I share my screen. So you should be able to see that now. Can you see that? Excellent. Okay, folks, so thank you very much, Gabriella, for that introduction and overview. And as Gabriella said, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look more at the sort of institutional level. And I just start off with this slide here, which is kind of all the options that are really open to sort of embedding sustainability in higher education. And you can see there on the left-hand side, it goes from institutional frameworks and agendas, campus education, teaching, research, outreach. So what I'm going to talk about in my talk here now is two things. One is the framework and the sort of the bigger picture, which I'm going to talk about the creation of the ATU ESD Academy, and then I'm also going to talk about a module that myself and my colleague Mark Kelly have been rolling out for the last number of years on education for sustainability. So I'm sure everyone who's looking is probably very familiar with the whole sustainability pedagogy. A lot of it is focused on competencies, and as Gabriella mentioned earlier on, we like to focus on the action competence. But you can see here, these are the two most common competence frameworks that are used in ESD. One is the UNESCO one, where there's 8 competencies, and there are the 12 competencies considered by Green Comp. Now, I like this drawing, this graphic, because it shows the mapping of them and that they are very aligned in reality. So just to talk about what ATU do in relation to ESD, we have strategic and institutional approaches. So ESD is embedded in our strategic plan. It's also in our learning, teaching and assessment strategy and policies. We now have the ESD Academy, which I think is probably the pinnacle of what we've done in relation to ESD so far. There are a lot of programs and modules in ATU that are focused on sustainability, and indeed many, because sustainability has featured in our programmatic review process for the last number of years. Sustainability is evident in a lot of modules in most programs in ATU. The idea, of course, is that we'll get it into all of them. There's a significant amount of sustainability in higher education research going on in all schools and departments. There are numerous projects and sustainability groups, and ATU are involved in a number of different rating projects, one of them with the EU Green project, which you're all familiar with. So a little bit here now on the Education for Sustainable Development Academy, which we launched last March. And it's a partnership between our Teaching and Learning Centre in Galway and the Centre for Sustainability. The idea is that the Academy will provide a place where we can develop, well, we can share knowledge, but we can develop a series of resources and opportunities for both staff and students. It's a culmination of a number of years' work by myself and also Dr. Mark Kelly. So I just maybe mention the people in the picture there. Obviously, that's myself on the left there, and in the centre there we have Dr. Karina Ginty, who is the head of our Teaching and Learning Centre in the Galway Mayo campus, and she has been a great advocate of ESD over the years. So it's with the Teaching and Learning Office, and so she's head of the Teaching and Learning Office and Mark's head of the Centre for Sustainability. So this academy is a sort of a joint effort venture between the two. So the idea for the Academy, of course, is to build and enable capacity in relation to ESD throughout the university. And the idea there, of course, is to facilitate the empowerment of staff at all levels, provide education and training opportunities for staff and students, provide a place for resources and teaching resources to be shared. Ultimately, we obviously want to build a community of practice, and we're hoping to do that probably also based on the fact that we've been delivering this module that I will be talking about later on, the Education for Sustainability module. We've about 80 staff from ATU who have already completed this, so we have a good basis to start there. And also, we're keen, I suppose, to start a place to share best practice. Now, the idea of the Academy is a pretty novel idea. The Academy is the first of its kind in Ireland, and we do have plans to broaden it out perhaps and see how we can work best with EU Green to see maybe how we can link into that. I can say that the Academy concept in Ireland is taking off, because I am aware now that there are a number of other universities and actually considering setting up their own ESD academies. So it obviously it is the right approach, I think, to engaging with sustainability. So here is just a brief outline of some of the projects that we're involved in relation to ESD and sustainability in higher education. So there was the Intuitor project, which was a national project. Obviously, we're in EU Green. I think most people on this call are from EU Green. There was a Higher Ed 4 project. This is SDS for Sustainable Development Solutions for Higher Education. We have a number of other projects on literacy for leadership, sustainable development goals projects, and of course, sustainability and ESD related projects are contained in all schools across all departments, all programs in all schools and all departments. We've got natural science, engineering, culinary skills, creative arts. I suppose I've done a lot of work over the last number of years on ESD, and I have been working with people from literally from every department in the university, all of whom bring an interest and an enthusiasm for sustainability, obviously focused primarily on their own disciplinary backgrounds. So one of the other things we'd like to do with the ESD Academy is kind of get people from various disciplines talking to each other, because as you probably know, sustainability is primarily a transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary problem. It affects all of us, and the solutions require trans and interdisciplinary collaboration. And the way to do that is to get people to work together to think about the problems and the solutions, not only from their own perspective, but also from the perspective of other professions. One of the other the Academy as well is introducing this called the Carbon Literacy Project, which is a project where we provide sort of 1 day's worth of training to people, and they become independently certified as carbon literate. We're currently rolling that out now in our construction department, and we're rolling it out currently to 150 students at the moment. We would like to get to the stage where all of our students in construction to start, because that's where we're going to trial it, but all of the students in ATU will be certified carbon literate. That would be one of our big ambitions in relation to the ESD and ATU Academy. So in addition to the Academy, we have a number of programs and modules that focus on sustainability. So I'm going to be talking to you in a little bit of detail about the level 9 10 credit certificate in education for sustainability. It's part of the current MA in teaching and learning that we run from the Galway Mayo campus. We also have another level 6 program, is 20 credit certificate on the Sustainable Development Goals, which is a special purpose award or a particular type of certificate at level 6, which is focused specifically on the Sustainable Development Goals. We also have, as part of our commitment to ESD nationally as well, myself and Mark also work with the National Forum, which is the national body for training educators in Ireland. We work with them on a number of ESD and SDG related initiatives, including a digital badge on education for sustainability, and also are currently rolling out a digital badge on the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think it's probably worth mentioning that many other programs in ATU have a focus on sustainability and climate change. For example, we have an MSc in sustainability leadership. We have a new MSc, an online MSc in climate, in sustainability and climate reporting run out of the Sligo campus. There are lots of programs across ATU focused on sustainability. In relation to the SDGs, we also have a lot of specific offerings. So we have a digital badge, which can be done in 5 hours. We have also developed a series of MOOCs, or massive open online courses, which can be accessed in relation to the SDGs. And again, as I mentioned, we have some micro-credentials. Something that Karina Ginty is pushing as well as part of the teaching and learning, and also as part of EU Green Work Package 2 and 3, and Work Package 2 in relation to education, is increasing ESD and SDG related education of staff across EU Green. And to that end, we have developed a Sustainable Development Goals digital badge, which well, with the original one we developed was for students, and that takes about 5 hours, I mentioned earlier. But we also have a staff badge now, which is basically a it's what I've been working a lot on the Sustainable Development Goals for the last 4 or 5 years. So basically, I've taken all the resources that I could find together and put them all together on an SDG badge for staff, which basically provides hopefully an overview of really good resources for the SDGs for staff who want to use the SDGs in their own teaching. These programs are available on the website that's listed there. So I know there is a launch in the EU Green to push people to engage with these digital badges. We are pushing the student badge in ATU, and we've had about 1,500 people do the badge so far. We are also hoping to push the Sustainable Development Goals staff digital badge across EU Green as well, to get people, well, A, to get them to know that the badge exists, and B, that they get access to the resources that I have put together in the badge. There is also a digital badge run by the National Forum, and then we have the 10 credit level 9 module, which I'm now going to give you a bit more detail on. So we have been running the ESD or the EFS certificate in education for sustainability since 2019. It's co-delivered by 3 of us, Dermot O'Donovan, myself, and Mark Kelly. It's basically we created the program was validated in, I think, 2018, late 2018, and we started to roll it out in 2019. The program is run as part of the Teaching and Learning Office, part of the MA in Teaching and Learning that's offered on the Mayo Galway campus. So it's a 10 credit level 9 module, which can be undertaken as part of the, as I say, as part of the MA in Teaching and Learning. over the years, we've had, I think, about 80 ATU students have completed it, and we'll be starting it again in January. When we started originally, I think we had a 4C module, but we now have got a 6C model, which we use to sort of frame the sustainability facets that we're looking at. So we have curriculum very clearly. Our focus is on developing and enhancing ESD-related offerings in the curriculum. The campus then, how you engage with ESD meaningfully on the campus. That could also involve the living lab, the living laboratory approach, or various interventions that are carried out on the campus, including potentially procurement, etc. Community has to be at the center of what we do as educationalists. We have some outreach on community, and we like to focus on that as one of the key areas where ESD can have meaningful impact. And certainly, I think in relation to the topic that we have here today, action community is probably the strongest area we have for that. Culture, we need to embrace elements of culture in order to bring the cultural focus onto sustainability. It allows us to reach out to a wider audience. Research, collaborative research is also a key element. And then I think we bring them all together with the last C, which is care. So the way the module is operated, here is just a sort of an introduction or an overview of what we hope to achieve. The idea is that people will explore and critically evaluate sustainability-related best practices. So what we attempt to do in the module is to bring international best practice and examples and case studies to the fore for people to look at. So here are just the learning outcomes of the module. Explore and critically evaluate sustainability best practice, identify and evaluate synergies between formal and informal teaching, identify and evaluate potential synergies between academic practice, institute culture, and the needs of the community. So as I mentioned, the community is a very important focus for us in relation to ESD and applying ESD in our teaching practice. Apply future-oriented thinking to address fundamental questions which are very important to all of us in this day and age, and design, test, and evaluate an evidence participatory learning intervention that creates cognitive, affective, and behavioral learning opportunities. So our assessment, actually, well, I'll get to that in a moment. So we have, as I mentioned, we have the 5 C's plus care. So we have 5 workshops that were facilitated by the various members of the team. And in each workshop, we normally have a mixture of presenting material, case studies, examples, and best practice. A lot of the feedback we've got from the students who've done the course recently is that the examples that we provide and the up-to-date and nature of them sort of makes people feel in touch with what's actually going on. We also provide obviously some written resources and access to up-to-date peer-reviewed journal articles from various internationally peer-reviewed journals. So here are some of the methods we use: lectures, guest lectures, tasks, use of mentoring, and I think probably the most popular and important thing that we've probably introduced to our pedagogy recently is peer triads. And so peer-reviewed articles, but peer triads is something I'm going to talk about in a moment now. So our assignments, we have in the module, we have 3 assignments. 2 of them are taking part in these peer triads, and one of them is to create is the final main assignment. So the peer triads, as I said earlier, have probably got the most positive feedback from staff, because basically students are placed in a triad with 2 other students, and it's up to them to meet and discuss and critically analyze the content of the previous workshop. So it creates new links, it creates alternative approaches, it provides people with an opportunity to actually actively reflect on what they're doing at the time, which is often missing. It's, I think, one of the very positive sides of having the opportunities to use teams and that, and to be able to engage with staff from other campuses or other disciplines. So very, very strong positive feedback on how the triads work. A number of the staff who have actually completed the completed the module actually now employ peer triads in their own teaching because they find the students find it very engaging. They often provide opportunities for students to engage in class time or indeed online in breakout rooms in the peer triad process, and it gives people time to reflect on what's actually being taught in live time. Now, the way we do it is we actually ask the peer triads to meet separate to our classes, but we do also use breakout rooms during the classes to allow people to discuss and consider and reflect on the presentations that we made. So that's the first two. So the main object or the output, which is what I'm going to finish my talk here on, is basically that the final assessment on this module is the creation of a learning object or an intervention that's applied in your own academic practice. So that, could take on any format. So we can see there's some examples. It could be a new module focused on sustainability. It could be a modification of an existing module or a program. It could be a novel method of assessment, or creating some new learning resources, or applying and engaging with new pedagogical approaches. So it's a very open book. We don't specify what you have to do, just that you use the material that you engage with in the module to focus on developing and delivering ESD related content in your own teaching. As I said, it was delivered since 2019. We've had 5 cohorts go through ATU, 5 cohorts that went that were just solely ATU. We had 2 cohorts where we also had people from other TUs, TUD, SETU, TUS, and we had 1 international cohort last year with EU Green. I think perhaps, I don't know if any of you on the call have actually done the module, but we had 35 people from around EU Green last year do it. So what I'm just going to finish off with is I'm just going to give you a flavor of the kind of work that we've done and the kind of engagement and actions that have been taken as a result of completing the module. So I'm going to do the first example. I'm just going to briefly go through these, because obviously each of these are detailed projects themselves. I'm going to look at one from the University of Évora, which I think has an international flavor. Of course, I'm going to look at one that was done by a colleague from TUD, which is a national flavor, and then I'm going to look at 2 smaller projects, or well, they weren't small projects, just they're 2 projects from ATU, 2 national projects. So the first project here, which was completed as part of last year's EU Green cohort, was a review of curricular units on environmental education, aligned with Education for Sustainability by Maria Iehu and Asunsao Folke. Maria is an ecologist, and Asunsao is an educational expert, early years education, and they undertook the course last year, and their overall assignment was to reflect and review on a particular curriculum unit. So they're going to review the learning outcomes, review the strategies, look at how they could link the learning outcomes with assessment and promote student participation. Now, obviously, these are things that they would have done probably to some extent as part of their regular job, but they did this with the new lens of all the material that they had obtained doing the course. When they completed the course, they had ultimately a critical review of the learning outcomes in the light of the new knowledge that they had from doing the course. They reviewed their strategies, they linked their learning outcomes, and they also carried out some surveys of the students while they were doing it. So they felt that the journey itself in relation to the students was transformative, but they also felt that the journey was transformative for themselves. And these are 2 very experienced lecturers who found the opportunities for reflection and considering, I suppose, the best practices that they had been exposed to, and the material very inspiring for how they could incorporate those into their own practices. So that's just one example, and sort of in some ways at a meta level. Here is another sort of high level, meta level project as well, where we have Dr. Keith Sunderland, who was the head of electrical engineering in TUD, who also did the module a couple of years ago. And his project was to develop a methodology utilizing sustainability framework with professional accreditation competency. So his project was actually quite complex. What he wanted to do was to take an educational framework, a sustainability learning framework, and blend that or use it as a filter for professional accreditation, which is quite a challenging undertaking. He had three objectives. One was to identify a framework that could be employed in conjunction with the chosen professional engineering competency. So he looked around at the various ESD frameworks that were available. He wanted to develop a systematic and auditable approach that could be used both for professional accreditation and in relation to the ESD. And the other thing he wanted to do is to have the flexibility to be able to use the methodology in other professional requirements. So it was a very high-level meta project with some rather aspirational outcomes. Basically, the idea was to merge, well, not merge, but to have the sustainability framework and the professional competency fieldwork and use them, and sort of, as merge is probably not the right word, but get them together to use them as a filter, so that when material was going through this process, that the learning materials that came out through it had sustainability fundamentally embedded in it as part of the professional competence. So his output was a process through integration of sustainability education into a professional engineering context, and this was applied and has been applied to a programmatic review of electrical energy, electrical services, and energy management programs in TUD. So I think that's a very significant application of an output from the program. Again, that was on a meta level. I'm going to look at two smaller case studies now. Natasha Rowan, who is a lecturer in computer science in the Mayo Galway campus, she carried out a project called Introducing the UN SDGs to First-Year Computer Sciences. So this was obviously a much more granular, student-oriented project, and basically the intervention consisted of a number of labs where questionnaires were used to quantify students' knowledge and student-related sustainable development. They were then asked to do the SDG digital badge. Now, I referred to this earlier on as one of the resources that we have in the ATU Academy. So the badge itself takes 4 to 4.5 hours to do, but it brings students through the SDGs one goal at a time through all 169 targets and 232 indicators. There's some nice graphics in it, so it's very, I think it's presented rather well in terms of the graphics and the animations that are used, excellent instructional design in it. So they were engaged with that, and then after that there was another peer triad reflection summary of how they found it, and how they felt about the SDGs and that. So people seem to like, the students seem to like actually using the badge. They found it was over 50% said they would recommend using it. The students said they really enjoyed learning about the SDGs through the badge. They found it a quick and effective way of getting an awareness, and also helped them to encourage taking personal accountability. And the lecturer themselves felt that the badge was a useful, insightful way of doing it. So again, it's a nice example of a single approach. So here is an example of some of the questions they asked. So in general, the attitudes and changes in relation to students' attitudes and that after was generally in positive and all more pro-environmental. So the conclusions from that were to embed SDGs in the curriculum early, incentivize it if possible. So provide marks for students to do the SDGs is a really easy way to get students into doing the SDGs and to utilize the badge. The next study I'll just present here now, and it's also the last few slides I'll be presenting, is connecting software and electronic engineers with nature. This, I think, is a really interesting project in that you don't always associate sort of computer science and electronic engineering with nature. So this is a problem. There are issues with populations of birds and mammals are globally, declining rates since 1970. So what can software and electronic engineers do? Basically, this staff member created an assessment an intervention where students go out around the campus, record bird sound, and come back and bring them and digitally analyze them in the lab. So they take sort of real world problem and bring it into nature, or a real world nature problem, and then they carry out the analysis. There's a number of international projects that are going on. So they linked to this. There's a very large project going on in Cornell about this. She also conducted some questionnaires with the students to find out whether they, if it improved their sense of well-being, did it help them, did it increase their empathy, and did it help with their interest in sustainability. So I'm just going to leave you on this slide here, and just to say that there are a huge range of projects that can be carried out if you apply it, and I think it's really interesting to see that something like electronic engineering can bring in sort of projects that encourage students to go out and walk around the campus and engage on a daily basis with their with nature in their actual studies. So, Gabriella, I don't know if there's any.
Sure, I'll take over just to.
Okay.
Thank you, John. Just to remind everyone where we started on our empowerment pathway, we started with those examples at the intervention level, module level, program level, and then, as you could hear from John's examples, wonderful things happen when you have a whole institution design, because obviously there are many more of those individual projects, like he exemplified, and I can attest to the power of the module because I've taken it a few years ago, and it has truly transformed one of my modules, and it has actually impacted my practice beyond that one module that I thought and changed quite a lot in that module. But again, the effect of taking that module and engaging in this exercise has a lasting effect on the way I teach. But you can see the two perspectives, right? What we can do, each of us, at an individual level, we can see the magic that happens when we have whole institution design approaches like the ESD Academy that we have at ATU, or a module that many staff can take, and obviously then the power that has to expand what we're doing. And the final level on our empowerment pathway is, of course, when we try to augment all of this through networks and alliances. And just 2 minutes to tell you about 2 examples of such networks and alliances. And the first one is engineering education for a sustainable future. And the second one is, of course, our very own EU Green. So the first project that I want to tell you about is a project led by George Onofre at ATU with partners from the IMTBS school, Politécnico de Madrid, and Polytechnic de Porto. And then there are industry partners that you see there, Wind Ireland Energy, European E-Learning Institute, and Momentum. And what all of these partners are trying to do is co-design and test new pedagogical models that connect teaching, learning, and sustainability action. And why do we say that this really amplifies what we do both at an individual level or program level and at an institution level? Because when practitioners come together and form these communities of practice that John also made reference to, we really change the magnitude and the impact of what we create. So it helps people find others that they can engage with, and we don't feel that we're innovating and we're working in sustainability in isolation. So we have a co-creation model, we have communities of practice, and what this means is that we are creating collective action competence. And what ESF is actually doing, you can see an example here. These are open educational resources that all of you can access. Now, they are built with engineering students in mind, but being involved in creating some of these resources, I can attest that they have a broad scope and they can be implemented in other courses with a bit of tweaking, or maybe no tweaking. But what you will have on the website is a menu of choices that educators can just go and select and use in their modules, because oftentimes we feel that we are time deprived and maybe we cannot be as creative or engaging as we would like. And having these sort of resources can really help us do this and really empower the community of teachers, and then, of course, empower our students. And finally, we have EU Green. And when we talk about EU Green, compared to maybe other networks that work in sustainability, the power of this is even broader because we have a long-term alliance, and we have all of the partners and everything that happens here from this very masterclass, where we are engaging in sharing and open learning, to all of the features of the program, such as the curriculum alignment and the mobility and the exchanges and all of the collaboration across universities that is happening. All of that is really an example of empowerment at a systemic scale. And as you can see, this is what we believe the empowerment pathway really is about. So yes, we are all doing something and we're all here, but we need institutional support. We need that structural oxygen. And then, of course, when we have the support of networks and alliances like the EU Green or ESF, our results and our impact is augmented yet again. So we hope that you got some ideas, some inspiration from our cases and our empowerment pathway suggestions. We would like to thank you very much for your attention, and we have a few minutes for questions. Please type your questions in the chat box and we will address them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gabriella. I think that is then, is it, Gabriella?
Yeah, we have finished with the content, and just if anyone wants to include any comments in the chat or any questions, I can see some links there. I can see questions that you maybe have addressed.
Yeah, George put in a link to the
to the ESF, the resources
project as well, which is another project that's being run in ATU. And someone also asked about when the next rollout of the module is. That's in January. So if you want to get details on that, you can just email me and I can put you on the link. So yeah.
And they also asked about the SDG course, and I've included a link to that in the chat box.
Yeah, you can. The SDG badge for students and staff are on that CPD Learn Online, so they're free. You can log in at any stage, and you can do either the student badge or the staff badge. Yeah, you just have to create an account.
Right. I don't see any other questions or comments that maybe we need to reply to. People are very nice and saying thank you. And thanks to you for taking the time to come and join us. We know how busy everyone is, but here we are, fighting the good fight.
Yeah.
Okay. We will share the slides, and there is this recording. I'm not sure where it will sit, but please do get in touch if there is anything. We want is to increase our collaboration. So please get in touch and we'll be more than happy to talk to anyone. And John will share all of those resources from the Academy at ATU.
Okay. Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much,
everyone.
Folks.